समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया.
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
अब समझा.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of Geopolitics with Swasti, where Swasti Rao, our consulting editor for international and strategic affairs, takes your questions, dear subscribers, on geopolitical developments around the world. Now, before we begin this episode, at the outset, I would like to tell you that we specifically for this show take subscriber-based questions only, and there are times when we do miss out on your questions. There are two ways to go about this. Please do consider taking a subscription of ThePrint, and if we miss your question, we will definitely try to take it in the next episode. With that, Swasti, I begin today's episode with a question by Shayan Banerjee. And he has a very interesting question, which is why I wanted to begin with it first, where he asks that, what do you think about Bharat Karnad's claim that India's 1998 thermonuclear device test was a dud? And if it was so, what is India doing about it?
Now, it's a controversial question, but it's an interesting one, and that's why I think we've selected it. So, it is true that a lot of questions have been raised by our scientists as well as international community, scientists from the international community, experts from the international community, on whether or not the tests that, he's referring to achieve the level of success which was claimed. And this is especially to do with the thermonuclear device called Shakti. Okay. And we initially claimed, at least, according to some official accounts, that the initial yield was about 43 to 45 kiloton capacity. Now, Bharat Karnad ke pehle, you have to also understand that there was this very famous senior scientist at the DRDO called K. Santhanam. K stands for Krishnamurthy. So Krishnamurthy Santhanam actually publicly challenged the official claims made by the government and said that no, these tests did not really match the success that they claimed. And he said that he in fact wrote a very public article and he kind of rebutted, all these claims. And he said that the official account of 1998 blast, Pokhran blast, and particularly around the thermonuclear device called Shakti, that all those tests had fizzled out. Now, this particular stance by K. Santhanam was challenged by two very prominent scientists as well, R. Chidambaram and Anil Kakodar. In fact, they have often been referred to as the Ayatollahs of India's atomic energy. And they have vehemently sort of, criticized K. Santhanam's, claims that these tests were not successful enough. And they, in fact, supported the government and said that everything was fine and the tests were just fine. Now, having said that, Bharat Karnad has been writing about this issue. And he, in fact, has taken a very realistic view and he has defended K. Santhanam and said that the tests may not have yielded the result that was claimed. But what is more important and why I think Bharat Karnad makes a very useful contribution to this debate, which is also very classified, the sheer nature of it is so classified, he says is that India needs to do more tests. So, whatever we did in 1998, according to Bharat Karnad, is not enough. It's a work in progress and India must do more tests in order to sort of ramp up its capabilities and all that. So that is what is there in the public domain.
And Swasti, following up on that, he has a question where he asks that, do you think that nuclear weapons can then be tested in a lab?
A very interesting question, actually. This was also asked by Shayan.
Yes.
It is true. Yes, there is something called subcritical testing, where you use advanced computer simulations and controlled experiments are carried out. And basically, the idea is that you mimic a nuclear explosion without actually having to do a real explosion. Okay. So, these things have been happening. I mean, US has, of course, reportedly carried out a lot of these lab controlled tests. But the issue is that if you look at the opinion within the strategic community, you will see that not everybody finds it very reliable. Okay, so reliability is a critical aspect. So they say that the under controlled conditions and due to computer simulations, etc. So whatever conditions you create for that detonation that mimic a real world detonation, those are not very reliable, and they really cannot substitute 100% for a real test. Now that's for the US. Now in India, it is true that India also has some capabilities of doing these tests in a lab. In fact, although the sheer nature of this subject is so classified, but even then, there are some details that keep coming out in the public domain. And if you know the BARC, the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in Bombay, so BARC has a supercomputer which is ours. It's called Anupam, and if you go into the details of what Anupam does, is that the scientists there, our team, is actually doing many of these tests, using Anupam and its supercomputer, capabilities. Now, having said that, what I'm saying is that just like in the US, like I said, that in the larger strategic community, the opinion is divided on whether the lab control tests are reliable enough or not. So the jury is still out, but you are right that nuclear weapons can be tested in labs and under controlled conditions which mimic a real world detonation.
Moving on, Swasti, Sunil has a question on what is India's current military preparations post Operation Sindoor.
And I think Sunil has been very upset about his question not being taken. But Sunil, you have to understand that we have to wrap up everything within 25-30 minutes. And there are times when we are not able to take questions. Doesn't
We
mean
get
that
a lot of questions.
Yeah. This time around, we got more than 20 questions.
Yes.
So anyway, but of course, that's a very relevant question. And thank you for asking us that one. So about military preparations after Operation Sindoor. See, I can get into a lot of details and I can give you a lot of lists of what is happening, because it is true that after Operation Sindoor, the government has embarked upon almost a $10 billion worth of military modernization for 3 of our branches of, our armed forces. It is true. So I can give you a lot of lists, but those can be found otherwise as well. What I'm going to tell you is the key takeaway and the bottom line of how do you understand this argument. Capabilities cannot be built overnight. Capital acquisition, whether of a ship or a tank or an aircraft, these are long drawn processes. Okay. It takes anywhere between 10 to 15 years from finding a need to placing an order for it, and then add another 10-15 years for it to be inducted and absorbed. Okay. So these are long drawn processes. But if you look at in terms of what we have right now, which is budgetary allocations, capital outlay on modernization and acquisition, and recent CCS approvals, all of that you will see has sort of added up to about 79,000 crore rupees, which is about $9.5 billion. And this is the large part of what modernization we have embarked upon for all 3 branches of our armed forces after Operation Sindoor, which means that there is a lot which is going on. The Navy is getting new ships, new submarines, new platforms. Air Force is working on integrating different sensors, new Rafale acquisitions. I'm sure you must be hearing about that. Army recently got a clearance for more NAG missiles, a lot of EW sensors, and so on and so forth. So the list is endless, because 79,000 crore, it's a lot of money.
It's a huge number.
But the point that you have to understand is that it is going to take time. So the immediate result cannot be expected in next 2 years, 3 years. Okay, because I told you that the nature of these capital acquisitions is very, very long. Analytically speaking, I think what is a more relevant question to ask, and which is asked on social media a lot of times, in fact, with a lot of, I would say, heightened emotions, is that where does it really place India's indigenization plans? Because emergency procurement, by definition, means that indigenization would then be put on a hold. So ideally speaking, we would like more defense value chains to be added in our country, better indigenized content in our country as per the MOD, rules and regulations, and especially the DAP, the latest DAP guidelines. Now, having said that, emergency procurement come in a context where we know the time is probably not on anybody's side. So time is a vector, and keeping that in mind, I think the most ideal way to go about it is to have a right balance. But you are right. These are the times when a lot of these acquisitions come and that they get labeled with with import bahadur and stuff. But frankly, if when you look at the concerns of national security, you will have to sort of make a priority list. Okay, you cannot be talking about everything which has an equal distribution. Okay, so there will be certain times when you will feel that imports are being preferred at the cost of indigenization, and it is true. I totally agree. But having said that, you have to understand that time is a very, very important vector.
With that, Swasti, we move on to Pakistan and the recent discussion there around TLP, based on which our subscriber Valkyrie has a question, and they ask, who do you think organized the TLP protests, and do you think there is a faction within the Pakistani army which organized it to create problems for Asim Munir?
Now, that's an interesting question because he has asked me to scratch beneath the surface. And as you know, with Pakistan, there are always so many conspiracy theories that are floating at the same time. So we will try to sort of keep it basics and, for the benefit of the other viewers also. So what is TLP? TLP stands for Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which was founded in 2015 by Khadim Hussain Rizvi. And Khadim Hussain Rizvi is a Barelvi Sunni, scholar. And he was the wheelchair-bound scholar of the current chief. And as you know from its name that it has links to Bareilly, which is a city in UP. So all of that is there. Now, please remember that, they reflect a very, very violent, a very, a staunch interpretation of Islam. And if you know the slogan, which is Sar Tan Se Juda, which means that, they go all out against blasphemy, etc. And if you remember in 2011, there was an incident where the governor of Punjab province, Salman Taseer, was actually murdered by his own bodyguard, Mumtaz Qadri. And then, of course, the TLP did not exist. But when the TLP came into being in 2015, I mean, their support for Mumtaz Qadri was absolutely unprecedented, which showed that there is a section within Pakistani society, which actually shows that there is a huge section within Pakistani public that really supports such extremist positions. So this is about what is really TLP. Now, I don't want to waste too much time because of course, Pakistan is very, very layered. But just to sort of connect it to and circle back to the current question, what happened in October 2025 is that if you remember, and here we have to link it to the Gaza Peace Summit. If you remember, Donald Trump is very much keen on this 20-point peace plan for Gaza. And he, along with many other leaders from the GCC and the European, countries, they have formalized what is known as the 20-point peace plan. Now, for that, this particular plan is also ratified by Pakistan. At least the initial version of it was ratified by Pakistan. And which was, so far what you see is that only the first part of that particular plan is carried out, which is that the return of hostages has been now done. But apart from that, there is nothing else that has happened. And I will take more of it in the next part of this question. But what I'm trying to say is that this particular thing was ratified by Pakistan and the TLP did not like it. In fact, the TLP said that this is something which is very unfair to Gazans. This is also very unfair to the Islamic cause, quote unquote. And what they did was that following that announcement and Pakistan's ratification, they said that their chief said that they are going to be doing a march, Al-Aqsa Gaza March. And they started on October 10 from Lahore. And the point was that from Lahore, they are going to go to Muridke. And and that is how the crackdown started. And let's just to cut a long story short, the protest did not unfold in a peaceful enough way. The protest became very violent. And what I'm saying is that some of them actually managed to reach Muridke, etc. Now, what has then happened because of the clashes and because of the deaths, etc., etc., the government of Punjab has actually asked the center to ban TLP. And this call for the ban has come after, like I said, that this operation which was carried on. This operation was also carried on to dismantle a TLP protest in Muridke. Now, long and short is that this is something, I'm sure Deblata will agree, that this is not really going to lead to a real solution of the TLP problem in Pakistan, because right now this is more done to really win favors and keep those favors with the United States, because frankly, the base that supports TLP and such extremist ideologies is actually pretty strong. So there is a lot of that internal party politics happening, electoral politics, etc., happening in Pakistan. So all this is to basically show that Pakistan is a victim of terror. This is Pakistan's narrative. So I think this is what is happening. Don't expect the TLP or the extremist ideologies are going to be uprooted or something has changed. This is simply just a show, at least as of now.
With that, Swasti, moving on to questions from the Middle East, and like we said that you will discuss it right now. We have a question by Aditya18893 on why Netanyahu did not participate in the Egypt summit.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it was for Israel, and it was quite strange, at least for those that do not know the theater, why Netanyahu was not present. Now, of course, if you look into the official details, it was said that, it is, some festival is happening and that's why he's not able to come. Of course, that's just rubbish. The real reason is that two reasons. One is that he doesn't want to be seen with Erdogan publicly. Turkey has been one of the harshest critics of Israel's actions in Gaza. So naturally, he doesn't want to be seen either with Abbas or with Erdogan. Second, please understand that that's something that I've been mentioning again and again. This 20-point peace plan is not going to hold. Okay? Netanyahu has no intentions of carrying out or sticking to this 20-point peace plan. But maze ki baat ye hai that everybody who was there also knows it.
Exactly.
Okay? And that is why if you see that suddenly there was so much fanfare around getting the hostages back. And once the hostages came back, suddenly now there is no talk of what is now going to happen. Because if you read the 20-point peace plan with a little bit of attention, you will see that there are so many loopholes that Israel is simply waiting to manipulate. Israel is going to go after Hamas. Also remember, Hamas is not going to disarm on its own, which is an enabling condition, which is the make it or break it condition in the 20-point peace plan. So everything in the 20-point peace plan flows if Hamas were to disarm completely. Hamas would never disarm completely. In fact, it was only days ago that there was some pretext and then Israel landed up striking targets again in Gaza because they said that Hamas did something. This is going to go on. Netanyahu has no intention of actually following it, and therefore and like I said, he doesn't want to be pictured either with Abbas or with Erdogan. Also remember, when this peace summit was happening, how many countries of the International Criminal Court actually have agreed to the fact that Netanyahu is a war criminal? More than 120 countries, right? Including countries like France, including countries like UK, etc. And all those leaders were there. So it is just strange, it doesn't make sense for Netanyahu to be photographed with those people. And remember that he is not going to honor it, but he doesn't want to be there because then the onus of responsibility is also going to fall on him. So long and short is that it doesn't suit Netanyahu's image, okay, to be photographed with people who have criticized him, and two, because he has no intention of doing it. In fact, what I've been saying is that not just Hamas, Netanyahu is now going to go after the Shia militias in Iraq, in Syria. If you see, Syria's situation right now is very, very precarious. And finally, please be ready for another round of conflict, direct conflict between Israel and Iran. So that is my understanding, and that is the reason why he didn't go there.
So, Swasti, from the Middle East, we now go to the Mediterranean, and there is a question by Satyapragyan Das who asks that how do you think a center-left candidate winning in the Turkey-backed region of Cyprus impact geopolitics? And moreover, will it have any impact on Turkey's domestic politics?
Very interesting question. Like I always say that I always enjoy these questions that give us a chance to actually explore more sides of the world. Now, Satyapragyan, before I answer that question, I think you seem to be aware of the fact that Cyprus is actually two Cypruses, but not many people would know. So let me just tell you this very, very interesting, unique situation in the Mediterranean. So when you say Cyprus, which is a small island in the Mediterranean, there are actually two Cypruses. One is northern Cyprus and one is southern Cyprus. Now, the Cyprus, which is a member of the EU, is southern Cyprus. That is where most of the Greek Cypriots live. Then there is the northern Cyprus, which is claimed by Turkey, which is called the Turkish Republic of Cyprus, or the northern Cyprus. Now, the interesting bit is that both these Cypruses have a common capital, which is called Nicosia. And Nicosia is the only city after Berlin. Remember, Berlin at one point of time used to be a divided capital between East Germany and West Germany. Similarly, Nicosia happens to be the only, divided capital between North Cyprus and South Cyprus, today. So it's like what Berlin once was. Now, Cyprus, it's interesting that it gained its independence in 1960. And then there were two major groups. One was, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. And they used to keep clashing, etc. Ultimately, the Greek side was, backed by Greece, and the Turkish side was, backed by Turkey. If you look at the map, you will see where exactly it is. And in 1974, there was a full-fledged military intervention where there was a formal division, let's say there was a division, there was a military division. So now what has happened is that large part of Cyprus has gone towards South Cyprus, which is about 2/3, right? Which is where about 900,000 people live, which are, practicing, all those people are practicing Orthodox Christianity, and they are Greek, And then on the other side, then 2% of that has actually gone to British military bases. And then the rest of it is Northern Cyprus, is what, Turkey controls. Now, very interestingly, there is also a green line that divides the two parts, which is the UN peacekeeping mission out there for Cyprus. So what has happened in the recent elections that, Satyapragyan was mentioning is that the candidate that has had a landslide victory of more than 62.8% votes, his name is Tufan Erroman. Now, this guy is somebody who has been calling for a unification of these two sides, okay, under let's say a federal solution, okay. On the contrary, Turkey under Erdogan has been promoting and backing this guy called Tatar, and he has lost. And he is the one who has been talking about keeping it two-state, etc., which is the Turkish plan. Now, with this kind of a result, it is very, very clear that such landslide victory would mean bad news for Turkey, because obviously this is not something that Turkey wants. Having said that, if you look at how or what kind of political statements have been coming from Erdogan and his foreign minister, you will see that they have been very pragmatic. They have not tried to sort of, make it sound very aggressive, and they have welcomed. They've said that, all right, this is a space which is open for more strategic dialogue, discussion, etc., etc. But remember that Cyprus, the issue of Cyprus and the ownership of gas fields in Eastern Mediterranean are the two reasons why Turkey and Greece do not see eye to eye with each other. And this is also a reason why Turkey has never been able to get into the EU, because every time Turkey has wanted, even before Erdogan, Turkey has wanted to get into the EU. Remember, this military intervention was done in 1974. Erdogan came only in 2002 and onwards, and finally he became the president in 2014. So even before that, every time Turkey had tried, because for a long time before Erdogan, Turkey was trying very hard to get into Europe, okay? Every time it tried, it was blocked because of the Cyprus issue. So Cyprus became a member of the EU full-fledgedly, but Turkey could never get into the EU. And then after Erdogan, of course, Turkey started to expand its influence in the Middle Eastern region and Syria, so on and so forth. So this is where things are, and it is really interesting. But I just took a bit of time to explain about Cyprus because it's quite fascinating. And also remember, and just the last thing is that when our Prime Minister recently went to Europe, to Cyprus and Croatia, etc., so that Cyprus was Southern Cyprus, which is a part of the EU, right? And then we also have here a full diplomatic presence by the same Cyprus, okay? And otherwise, on this particular issue, India backs the UN, the UN solution for it. So it's just very interesting. We are also looking at furthering more defense cooperation with Cyprus. Israel is a major defense supplier there. It is important for India because in that region, in the Mediterranean region, India, Greece, Cyprus, these countries sort of huddled together against the rising bonhomie between Turkey and Pakistan and Azerbaijan, although Azerbaijan and Caucasus, but still. So That is the geopolitical logic, but Cyprus is a very, very interesting country.
From that, Swasti, we move on to a question by Anubhav Saxena, who asks that, do you think US sanctions will have an impact on the Chinese buying Russian oil?
Well, so as far as the sanctions are concerned, obviously this is something that Europe was actually waiting for a long time. So very quickly, before I tell you whether they have an impact or not, I think what makes these sanctions, the first ever by Trump against Russia, so important to study is because this reflects a kind of a shift in Trump's approach. Because if you know that this came shortly after the Budapest meeting between Trump and Putin was cancelled, and just merely hours into it, Trump came up with these sanctions against Russia, and basically said that they are going to be sanctioning, Russian oil refineries, etc. And then, of course, this was also reported that Chinese national oil companies like PetroChina, like Sinopec, like CNOC, it's called CNOOC, and Genua Oil, all of these will refrain from dealing into seaborne oil imports from Russia because of US sanctions. And if you know that even in India, that Luka Oil and Rosneft,
Right.
are clearly sanctioned. So Indian refiners have also said that, okay, we are not going to be buying from them. Now, this is important, analytically, because it comes not just from the US, but if you know that this is building on the 19th tranche of sanctions by the EU. So it is a rare display of Western unity or a coordinated Western action, which was absolutely missing ever since Donald Trump had come.
Right.
So this is a rare display of that coordination between US, UK, and the EU, that all three entities have together put sanctions on seaborne oil, exports that were going from Russia to mainly countries like India and China. But since your question is on China, there's one thing that you need to know is that China imports roughly 1.4 to 1.5 million barrels of Russian crude oil every day by sea. But that is not all, because you should know that China also imports approximately 900,000 barrels per day of Russian oil by the Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean, the ESPO pipeline. Okay, and the pipeline imports are not sanctioned. The seaborne imports are sanctioned, right? But anyway, 1.4, 1.5, million is quite a lot. Now, also the third part, please remember that when it comes to China and when it comes to the oil and gas trade between Russia and China, a lot of the numbers are actually not provided in the public domain. Okay, so many of these are approximations. The real numbers could be even higher. So that's one. The second thing that I would like to tell you is that just when the Russia-Ukraine war had begun, and when back then the Biden administration had started putting sanctions after sanctions, in fact, Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world today, what the Chinese did very cleverly was the Chinese set up working groups and study groups to really study the impact of secondary sanctions on their companies and on their banks, if they continue supporting Russia. So, Chinese, the one thing that we have to really give it to them, I mean, the credit has to be given to them. They're very, very thorough, with what they do. So they saw that it was in their interest to keep helping Russia against US-led order, etc., which definitely China wants to undermine. But having said that, they were very, very mindful of not exposing their banks, their financial systems, and their refiners and their refineries to US sanctions by setting up these study groups. In fact, if you go into the first year of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, this is something that China was doing much ahead of anybody else. Okay, so they are already studying it. As far as how much will that impact? Now, like I said, that as you can see, this is only applying to seaborne, imports, and not really applying to pipeline imports. And please remember that more than economic impact, like I said, that this is more of a political or geopolitical statement from Trump. I personally do not think that there will be a major impact, because this one set of sanctions alone will not work. It is showing some results in Russia. But since your question is on China, but please remember there's an entire fleet of shadow tankers and shadow subsidiaries, etc., which are working. So it will create some impact, and nobody wants to rub Trump the wrong way, especially at a time when China-US tensions are also at an all-time high, and they are going to be meeting soon and talking soon. So you will see a cut how much of it is optics and how much of it is really substantive, only
Remains to
time
be
can
seen.
tell. You cannot really assess these things over a period of 5 days, 10 days, or 2 weeks. Okay, we will have to wait and see how the next 6 months unfold.
With that, Swasti, since we are on this topic, the one last question I will take is from Fab 2042 on why the Putin-Trump meeting in Budapest was called off.
Because before the Trump-Putin meeting that was supposed to happen in Budapest, which Orban was sort of publicizing all the time, which was to be a big political moment for him. Before that, there was a meeting between Marco Rubio and Lavrov, who's Russia's foreign minister. That meeting could not come to a conclusion. So that meeting, Russia had rejected the Donald Trump's plan of freezing the battle lines where they are. Remember that Russia is still not able to take Donbass. So what Russia had been saying, come to think of it, Russia was basically suggesting like a package solution that you give us entire Donbass. Donbass consists of two regions, Lugansk and Donetsk, okay? And Russia has still not been able to take all of that. If you remember Pokrovsk, etc., all those, Kramatorsk, all those lines are there. All that fighting is going on there. So Russia wanted the entirety of Donbass, and they said that all right, we are going to sort of drop some claims here and there. But America was saying that no, you will not get any extra territorial concessions. You are going to stop wherever you are right now. If Russia stops where it is right now, which means that Russia will not have 100% control of any of those 4 regions that they annexed. And this is going to be very, very difficult for Putin to justify back home, because the war is now going to enter its 4th year. So you have to show tangible victory. Now, because of the fact that Russia rejected Trump's plan, was because the Trump-Putin meeting in Budapest couldn't happen. And in fact, the rest is for you to see, which is that merely hours after that, Trump went on record and said that I speak to Putin and every time the call is very good, but it doesn't go anywhere. And that is why he said that he put the sanctions, etc. But as far as the reason is concerned, this is the reason why it was called suddenly. And it was also a little, interesting to see, because a lot of people were very, even in India, actually, a lot of analysts and experts were very confident that now this time around this war is going to end, and you will see a lot of articles being published around it, and they were not wrong, because like I said, that there is a very, very strong belief in this position that Russia-Ukraine war will be ended by Donald Trump and Putin talking bilaterally, and the others actually don't matter so much. But that's what I've been saying, that if you talk about it from sitting in India, this is what it seems like. But when you are in Europe and when you see what is really happening, it is impossible to not accord agency to Europe or to Ukraine, because that is where the war is going on. And that is also the reason why, despite successive and repeated, trials, the war has not come to an end. And in fact, now my assessment is that the war probably will go on at least for another 6-7 months. But anyway, we are going to be back to discuss why did I say 6 months, so I can sort of end the answer there.
And on that speculative note, Swasti, we come to an end of this episode. We look forward to your questions for another episode. Stay tuned with us. Thank you.